King Ludwig II of Bavaria, otherwise known as the Swan King, was quite a bizarre chap with quite a bizarre story. Ludwig and his brother Otto enjoyed the childhood a 19th century European prince might expect. He was well fed and highly educated, but had a, shall we say, limited relationship with his parents, and was meticulously tutored instead, causing him considerable stress from an early age. The witty devil that he was, he referred to his mother as my father's consort for a period of time, in a passive-aggressive episode, seen today only very infrequently. Unless you know my mum. Ludwig's father took charge of teaching the boy how to properly handle money, ordering him to keep exact accounts of his allowance spending. This must have been confusing to the spoiled Ludwig, who must have been of the belief that accounting wasn't his job, and it's fair to say that he wasn't anticipating having to do the accounting on his sweetie transactions once he was king. His ascendancy to the throne of Bavaria came sooner than most expected, with his father croaking in 1864 when Ludwig was just 18 years old. Despite his already odd personality, he was initially popular among Bavarians. He would often be seen taking strolls in the countryside and was friendly with the people he met, and is well documented sending gifts to those who were hospitable to him. He was also a hunk. In government, however, he was widely disapproved of, given his preference towards daydreaming above all else. He actually didn't do much governing at all, largely leaving the job to his beleaguered ministers. In 1866, 2 years into Ludwig's reign, his territory was caught in the middle of a war between Prussia and Austria. Choosing to side with the Austrians, he and his allies lost the war miserably in a matter of weeks, forcing him to sign a mutual defense agreement with Prussia. As a result, Bavaria was made a semi-autonomous region of the new German Empire after the successful campaign in the Franco-Prussian War. Amidst all this, Ludwig was trying to produce an heir. His diary entries from the early 60s shed some light on why he was unsuccessful, aside from his constant voyages into his own fantasy world, that is. To avoid ambiguity, the man was gay. This would have been too much of a scandal for a king to bear in the 19th century, so he did the only thing he could. He got engaged with his cousin, Duchess Sophie in Bavaria. To be precise, she was his first cousin once removed, so if they had had kids, they would have been Sophie's own second cousins. After multiple postponements by the king, the ceremony ended up being called off altogether, and Ludwig decided to blame Sophie's father for the gig falling through. The sexually repressed King Ludwig largely stopped politicking after becoming answerable to Kaiser Wilhelm, and instead began putting the accounting skills he'd learned from his father into use. One important thing you need to know about Ludwig is that he was disturbingly obsessed with a certain Richard Wagner, whom you may know either from your study of the great romantic composers or from your encyclopedic knowledge on those who most strongly influenced the worldview of the soon-to-be-born Adolf Hitler. That's right, a gay Catholic king striking up a deep interest in a promiscuous fascist. No doubt Ludwig saw this as a match made in heaven. It had been over a shared appreciation for Wagner that Ludwig almost married his cousin. The pair sometimes called each other by the names of characters from Wagner's operas in their correspondence. After 1870, Wagner, for whom extortion had ostensibly stopped bearing fruit as a viable means of generating income, made an appeal to the king for financial help. The prudent man that he was, the king loaned Wagner the equivalent of $32 million today. He also threw a villa into this deal, because why ever not? But to understand Ludwig and his obsession with the works of Wagner properly, one must look at Neuschwanstein Castle. The grandiose castle atop a hill that looks more like a fairy tale setting than a home was the king's most ambitious project of all. Its beauty, it must be said, is hard to overstate. Seemingly just to outdo his late father, it was located such that it very nearly cast a shadow over Hohenschwangau. Not only the castle where he spent much of his childhood, but also one built by King Maximilian II himself. Ludwig doubled down on his daddy issues by completely bankrupting himself, just as his father would have wanted. In 1883, he owed the equivalent of around $50 million to other rulers and moneylenders. That's more than the project itself cost, and more than double what he projected it would cost. The castle was designed almost entirely to recreate or depict scenes from Wagner's operas. It suited the king's personality perfectly. The throne room was effectively an empty space, where holding court was impossible. By this time, despite going on to rule for another 6 years, he'd already given his last court as king. It was also decorated all over with a mix of biblical depictions, as well as settings from operas, mostly those of Richard Wagner. Similarly, the Hall of Singers, the largest room in the house, was not intended to be used as anything more than a lavishly decorated hall through which to wonder and marvel. There were almost no guest rooms, partially for financial reasons, but partially because Ludwig was a total introvert. He had no intention of welcoming too many guests, so this suited him just fine. There were a number of secret passageways and staircases so that the king could be served with minimal human interaction. A grotto, or cave, was also built and fitted with an artificial waterfall as it depicted a setting from a Wagner opera. He also found it a pleasant spot to hide from his responsibilities and anyone who might ask him to do actual work. The castle was also fitted with cutting-edge technology, including a battery-powered bell system which enabled the king to communicate with his servants from what he considered to be a safe distance. The toilets also flushed automatically, and the castle also offered warm running water. Unfortunately, the castle was never completed. The chapel building is missing, as well as the keep, which would have been by far the castle's tallest tower. By 1886, Ludwig's eccentricity, unwillingness to lead, and crushing debt were becoming frustrating to his ministers, at the point where, in June of that year, they put together a commission of psychiatrists who declared him unfit to rule, giving him the probably incorrect diagnosis of paranoia. Either way, they showed up at Neuschwanstein to report the findings of the panel. Surprisingly enough, they discovered that Ludwig does not take kindly to being told he's unfit to rule, or asked politely to vacate the throne. In a shocking turn of events, he had the men arrested, but after pressure from the government and the removal of the police guarding his castle, Ludwig was eventually removed from Neuschwanstein for the last time, having only spent 11 nights there in total. He was held at Berg Castle, where, the day after his deposition, he went on a long walk along the shore of Lake Starnberg with one of the doctors who had declared him insane. Hours after they were meant to return, and after a long search, both men were found near the lake shore. Largely an unsurprising development, except for the fact that both were dead. Ludwig's body showed no sign of struggle, so his death was ruled a drowning, but no water was found in his lungs, and he was a good swimmer. And the water was waist deep. The doctor had apparently been strangled, but no suspects for this apparent murder were ever found. Some allege that the king was shot, and that the government covered this up. They say some of his loyalists had popped onto the shore with the intention of rescuing him from his captors and restoring him to government. The story goes on to suggest that someone must have panicked, possibly the doctor, and ended up shooting him. There is no way to be sure to this day. So what do you think? Was it a suicide, a murder, natural causes, a dead body double appearing to allow the king to escape? To Argentina, perhaps? I hope you've enjoyed this video. It is the first on this channel. I agree that it's not the best and I shall try to improve. If you have suggestions as to how I should do this, or some story suggestions for a future video, don't hesitate to leave it all in the comments section. Until next we meet, cheerio.